coming up on Marriage Today.
Once we get comfortable with the relationship, we begin to focus on other things and we put the relationship on autopilot. And that's when everything bad happens in marriage, is when we hit autopilot.
Well, I think you have to be careful as a woman, especially if you're seeking God for what you want, not to get preachy and religious with your husband, because that's the biggest turnoff to a man. Is, I wish you read the Bible, I wish we prayed, I wish you go to church. I mean, you're just pushing him even farther away, and that's where you have to start trusting God. You start trusting God for whatever needs to happen in your marriage, and hang in there, because it'll change, it really will.
A couple of years ago, Karen started accusing me of something. It's kind of hard to talk about. But one morning, I was walking through the bedroom, and Karen said, you pulled the covers last night. She accused me of being a cover puller. And 40 years of marriage, never happened before. I walked through the bedroom. She's making the bed. She said, you pulled the covers last night. And I said, no, I didn't. She said, yeah, you did. And I said, no, Karen, I did not pull the covers. I do not pull the covers. There's nothing worse than a cover puller. There's like thieves, murderers, terrorists, and cover pullers. And I'm not a cover puller. She said, yeah, you are a cover puller. You pull the covers a lot. I said, no, I don't. So I was kind of put out with that. And so I was staying at a hotel. I was speaking somewhere, and I was by myself. So I woke up the next morning after, when I was about to check out of my room, and I was walking through, and I looked at the bed, and I noticed that I had pulled all the covers to my side. And for just a nanosecond, I thought Karen might be right. But then I realized if you're sleeping by yourself, it's not cover pulling. It's just using all the available covers, right? Okay, and so by the way, I have a basic life principle that I'm not responsible for what I do when I'm unconscious. How many men agree with that? Only confront me for what I do when I'm conscious. If I'm unconscious, I don't want you talking to me about it. Anyway, so I thought maybe Karen was right, but then I realized not. So I go home, and so October of last year, we had the worst night that we've ever had together. It was just cover wars all night long, and Karen was pulling the covers, horribly pulling the covers all night long. And about the middle of the night, I'm starting to get cold. I realized the covers are off the bed. All I've got is just one cover left, and the main cover's been pulled off the bed, and I'm just thinking, what is wrong with her? She is trying to accuse me of pulling the covers when, in fact, she's the cover puller in the family. She's trying to blame me, but she pulled the cover. So I get out of bed the next morning, and I step out of bed, and I step on something. And I realize it's the blanket. It's on my side of the bed. And at first, I think I pulled the covers completely off the bed last night. And that's what was happening. But then I realized Karen pulled them off, and she came over and planted it on my side. So later, all the guys understand this. So I stepped out of bed, and the covers were on my side. Okay. So I'm walking through the bedroom later in the morning, and Karen is standing next to the covers, like she's been waiting there for me to walk through. And I walked through, and she said, see what you did last night? And I said, yeah. And I walked through. Well, that's kind of the day that I realized I had a problem. And I could see myself sitting in a group saying, hi, I'm Jimmy, and I'm a cover puller. Everybody says, hi, Jimmy. And, I couldn't believe it, first of all. I couldn't believe that I pulled the covers all the way off the bed. And so I told Karen, and she also accused me of snoring, and about the same time. And I said, I don't snore. Then the neighbors called and asked why we were mowing the yard at night. And I said, we're unconscious, leave us alone. But this is not about cover pulling. It's about a dynamic in marriage that happens once we've been married for a while. Man, just about everybody goes through this dynamic, but it's a very dangerous dynamic. And that's where I was. Karen had been saying to me for a couple of years that, that I was pulling the covers. And my response to that was, no, I'm not. I didn't. And she would say to me, I couldn't sleep last night because you were pulling the covers, or you were snoring, or whatever. Well, I stopped pulling the covers. As soon as she said that about me sleeping with her, what I realized was I didn't care. I was not caring about how she slept. I was not caring about her experience sleeping. All I was caring about was myself. And here's the dynamic that happens in marriage. Once we get comfortable with the relationship, we begin to focus on other things and we put the relationship on autopilot. And that's when everything bad happens in marriage, is when we hit autopilot. In dating, the thing about dating and when you're newly married is you're highly focused on your spouse, and everything that happens to them is very important to you. You want them to enjoy you. You want them to enjoy what you say and what you do. You're highly focused. You're very proactive in pleasing each other. But the longer you stay married, there is the process that we go through, that we hit autopilot, we begin to take each other for granted, and then our spouse begins to complain about stuff, and it actually annoys us. Whereas before we wanted to hear it, and before we were very receptive to what they were saying, now we become insensitive to it. Well, I'm going to talk about flying. I'm a pilot, and I fly a plane, a little plane. I just fly a single-engine plane, but I'm a pilot. And I want to talk about autopilot. Now, this would surprise some people to know, but a lot of pilots don't know how to fly very well because of autopilot. One of my friends runs a charter service, a flying charter service, and he hired a commercial pilot to fly for him, like, twin-engine props and King Airs and things like that. And this pilot of about 30 years went to work for him, and my friend hired him immediately when he knew that he was a commercial pilot and had all these, 15,000 hours flying. And the guy, when he took the job, this pilot said, well, I'm going to have to brush up on my skills because it's been a while since I've flown. And my friend said, what do you mean it's been a while since you've flown? You're a commercial pilot. He said, the plane that I fly, I drive to the runway, push a button, it takes itself off, flies all the way there, lands itself, and I park it back at the gate. Flying has become so sophisticated that some of the crashes that you're hearing about are actually the autopilot disengaging, and the pilots don't have the skills to fly the plane without that autopilot. And so my plane has autopilot. There's a little button right on the dash that once I take off, I can pre-program the autopilot, I take off, I get up in the air, and I can hit autopilot, and it'll fly me all the way to the runway. Now, my plane won't land itself, but I can fly it all the way to the runway, click off of autopilot, and land the plane. But the more you use autopilot, the more you lose the skills of flying. And more, what my friends and I, what we do is we hand fly up to altitude. We hand fly for a long time, and then we hand fly down. When you're on autopilot, first of all, you lose skills. Secondly is you become distracted. And so when I'm flying my plane by hand, I am extremely sensitive to the entire aircraft and what's going on. I'm flying it. And if I just barely pull my yoke over, that plane's going to turn this way. If I barely push it forward, it's going to go nose down. Whatever I'm doing with my feet, with my hands, I'm totally in control of that plane, and I'm very, very sensitive to it. The minute I hit autopilot, here's the way I fly. Looking down at the ground. I'm still engaged with my instruments and everything here. We listen to XM radio. We'll listen to golf or listen to football or listen to something like that. We'll listen to the radio, but as soon as we hit autopilot, we are not sensitive to the airplane any longer because we know that autopilot's flying the plane. But ultimately, you become unconscious. There are pilots that hit autopilot and go to sleep. There have been commercial pilots that have overflown their destination because they got up in the air, they hit autopilot, and they actually went to sleep. Here's what happens in marriage. The minute you hit autopilot, you begin to lose the skills of relationship. Now listen, there are couples that have been married for 1 year that have better relationship skills than couples been married for 40 years. You've been on autopilot for so long, maybe not completely in the relationship. Karen and I, when Karen was complaining to me about, pulling covers and things like that, we're on autopilot in our relationship, but I was in that area of our relationship. And it worried me. When Karen said that and I realized how bad I'd been pulling the covers, I just thought, I really am checked out in that area, and I hope there are other areas that I'm not checked out also. But you lose the skills. As soon as you put your relationship on autopilot, you actually begin to lose the skills of relationship, and you begin to lose awareness of your spouse and what's going on in their life. And ultimately, you just become, like I said, don't confront me on what I'm doing when I'm unconscious. We shouldn't be unconscious in marriage. For example, when I wake up at night now, I told Karen, I said, Karen, I can't do anything about cover pulling. There's two things I can do about cover pulling. Okay, you're semi-conscious, when you're rolling over at night. So the first thing I do is I roll toward her, not away from her. When I'm rolling over at night, and when I roll away from Karen, I push the covers her way. Okay, before, for 2 years, I kept saying, I'm not pulling the covers. I'm not a cover puller. Now, I'm highly sensitive when I'm in bed of what's happening to Karen all night long, which before I wasn't. That's what I'm talking about. You've got to click off. I've got two buttons in my plane. I've got a button right here that says AP, that's autopilot. I've got a button on my yoke that's a red button that says AP, and that's how you click off autopilot. I want everybody clicking off autopilot tonight. If you've been in any area of your relationship, you're losing, if you're on autopilot in any area, you're losing the skills of relating and you're losing awareness of each other. And it's a dangerous, dangerous thing to do. So the question is, why do you ever hit autopilot in the first place? Well, the first is, you think once you've reached altitude that you can just coast on in. In other words, we worked to date, we worked to get married, we're doing great, and so we can hit autopilot, and now we can just coast on in. Well, here's what you need to understand. Planes run out of gas. My plane has 4 hours of fuel. That autopilot's dandy until you run out of gas. And the best plane in the world without gas is going to crash. The other reason that we hit autopilot is we want to focus on something else. And so we focused on each other and we fell in love and we married, but now I want to focus on my career, or we want to focus on the kids, or we want to focus on something else. Listen, the instant you hit autopilot and your focus turns somewhere else, your marriage is in danger. You cannot, your main focus, like I said, we have the instrument panel in front of us. When I hit autopilot and I'm flying, I look out the window for a minute and I do my scan of the instruments. A knowledge of what is happening at the instruments has to be the number one thing that I'm doing when I'm flying. Listen, in marriage, yes, we have careers, yes, we have children, yes, we have other things, but our spouse has got to be the main focus of our lives. Except for Jesus Christ, we have to keep if you're saying we've got other things to do and I've got to focus on something else, it's the beginning of the end. The minute you hit that autopilot and you begin to put your focus somewhere else, bad things happen. The other reason that we do it is that's how we were trained to fly. You say, well, Jimmy, isn't that normal? Well, let me say, if your parents or whoever trained you in marriage, if your parents were on autopilot, they either flew very low or they crashed. I want you to get to a high altitude and I want you to stay there for the rest of your marriage. And I want you to hand fly the airplane. I never, ever want you for the rest of your married life to ever hit autopilot. And if you're on it right now, I want you to click off. If you hit this button, I want you to click off with this button right here. And we're going to hand fly it in. Here's the truth about the flight of marriage. Number one, no marriage can fly itself. It requires human input. You've got to have two human beings working at the marriage for the marriage to work. Number two is marriage is a two-pilot plane. My plane is a one-pilot plane. But the best planes are two-pilot planes. You have to have two people in the cockpit to fly that plane, okay? Marriage is a two-pilot plane. Don't make your spouse fly the plane by themselves. They can't. Marriage requires the input of two people. The other thing is flying the plane is the most important thing you can do if you value the other lives on board. Listen, if your plane goes down, your children are going to get hurt. If your plane goes down, other people are going to be hurt. Imagine for just a minute that you get on a commercial flight and it's a big plane, it's a two-pilot plane, and you see both the pilots in there. Maybe it's a man and a woman. You get on the plane, you're boarding, you see this male and female pilots in there, and you're thinking, that's great. And the plane takes off. There's a couple hundred people on board, and after about 20 or 30 minutes of the plane being up in the air, both pilots walk out the door and just come out and start visiting with everybody. And they're just having the biggest time. They're just visiting with everybody. And that's okay for 5 or 10 minutes. You're thinking, hey, y'all, okay, well, they got autopilot on this plane. But they leave the door open. You can see there's nobody up there. And then 30 minutes goes by, and an hour goes by, and 2 hours goes by, and you're thinking, hey, you people need to get up in that cockpit up there. When you're not tending to your marriage, that's how your children feel. Your children need mom and dad up in the cockpit flying that plane. It's a two-pilot plane. And if it goes down, those children are going to get hurt. And so the very best thing that we can do for our family is to work on our marriage.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that teaching. I got a lot of tremendous response off that teaching. People could really connect with it. And just the illustration, of being a pilot and flying and how to keep your marriage flying high. And so that's just a small part of the actual full teaching that I did, Flying High in Marriage. Right now, for your gift of any amount to support us here at Marriage Day, we want to get you the CD single for Flying High in Marriage, the message that you just saw a part of right there. Now listen, when you support us here at Marriage Today, you're helping us to come back to you, but you're also helping us to go help other families and other children stay together with their parents. We're a ministry ministering to you, but we're also a mission. We go across America and around the world, and your financial support right now is very important to keep us doing what we're doing, but to keep expanding this much needed ministry in the day that we live in. And so for your gift of any amount, we'll get you the CD single of the part of the message that you saw right there, the full message. We'll get it to you. For $75 or more, we'll get you Flying High in Marriage, the entire 5-part seminar on CD, plus the Right One book. Now, the seminar, the Flying High in Marriage, the message that you just saw there are 4 other messages that are a part of that. The Right One book now is a book before you get married. Now, if you're married, you don't need it. If you're not married, it's going to be perfect for you. If you have a youngster, a high school student, a college student, a single person that you know, a divorced person you know, and they want to get married to the right one, this book is about how to date and how to marry the right person, the person that God has for you, but to do it in the right process. A perfect graduation gift, perfect gift to give to someone who's single. For $120 or more, we'll get you the full Flying High in Marriage DVD series, 5-part, plus the Right One book and the workbook. There's a workbook that you can have a small group study for singles, for high school, for college, whatever. It's a fantastic resource, plus the Flying High in Marriage DVDs. Please support us here at Marriage Today. We want to get you these important resources. Here's how you can get them.
In the Flying High in Marriage series, you'll discover why you fell in love, how to heal from the emotional scars of life, and what keeps your relationship growing and thriving. Support Marriage Today with your online gift of any amount, and we'll send you the Flying High in Marriage single.
We didn't get married to live 2 separate lives. We got married to share our lives together, and we're going to run this thing together as a team.
Receive the 5-part CD series and the Right One book for your gift of $75 or more. In the Right One book, you'll get biblical, no-nonsense advice on successfully dating and marrying the right person. For your gift of $120 or more, you'll receive the 5-part DVD series, the Right One book, and the Finding the Right One workbook. Included in the 5-part DVD series is a celebrity panel with Stephen Curtis and Mary Beth Chapman, Tim and Charisse Brown, and Sean and Catherine Lowe. Marriage can get better year after year. You and your spouse can fly high in marriage.
We're talking in this program today, Karen, on flying high in marriage, just using the analogy of flying and, keeping our marriage where it should be. Mm-hmm. And we're going to actually answer some questions from some viewers. And I want to ask you this question. This was written to you. Karen, how do I encourage my husband that we need to work on our marriage? He's content and I'm miserable. He won't read a book, much less go to counseling.
This question is very common. I can handfuls of women that I know that this is their issue. They want their marriage to improve, but the husband absolutely is checked out. And, it's something that, I know worked for us. And so I pray it works for y'all. And that is, don't concentrate on what's wrong with him in your marriage, but just let the Lord start dealing with things with you. And as God changes you, you would be shocked to how things start changing all around you. And, give the Lord a chance to work through you. But the way He's going to work through you is by changing you. Because as much as that you don't like what you have in your marriage, if I was to talk to your husband, he'd probably say that something is wrong about you. So, there's 2 sides to every story. And yes, I appreciate the women who want their marriages to be better, because usually it's the woman who's the one fighting the hardest for a marriage to be good. And so I applaud you. I say keep at it, but let the Lord change you first. And, it's that scripture that is so true. 1 Peter 3, where the woman is gentle and quiet and she wins her husband without a word. That is powerful. That tells you God has something in mind when He put that in the Word. It's something to believe in, to trust God for, that He really can change your husband through your behavior. And then that will open up the door eventually where you can say, these are the things I'd love to see happen in our marriage. And it won't be out of trying to force it. It'll be out of a sweetness that just He's attracted to.
Well, it's redemptive love. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's an offense. A husband has turned his heart away because he feels like you're taking care of the kids more than him. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes it's just his problem. He's just checked out. He's not doing what he should do. You redeemed me, Karen. Mm-hmm. You prayed for me. You treated me better than I deserved. And that's what redemptive love means. It means you're doing the right thing mm-hmm. when the other person's doing the wrong thing. And see, 1 Peter 3, what you're talking about was written to wives. 1 Peter 2 said Jesus died for us while we were still in our sins, and He left an example. When we were doing the wrong thing, He did the right thing. And I love this saying, that the best person does the right thing first. If you're the best person in the marriage, you're going to do the right thing first. You're not going to do wrong. And a lot of marriage counseling is listening to the wrong thing that somebody did, but they justify it because the wrong thing their spouse did. And they say, well, I know it wasn't right to throw the remote at him, but he didn't, do this and this. Well, you can't say this and it justifies this. But redemptive love says, I want to do the wrong thing, but instead, I'm going to love you the way Jesus loved me when I was in my sins, and I'm going to redeem you with my love. And that's the promise that's given, Karen, that it says to women there. It says to without a word, you can win your husband as he sees your chaste, which means pure, and respectful behavior. He's not being obedient to the word, but you're respecting him and being pure. And it says it's so powerful when he sees that kind of behavior that rather than driving him away, it's like a magnet that draws him back.
Well, I think you have to be careful as a woman, especially if you're seeking God for what you want, not to get preachy and religious with your husband, because that's the biggest turnoff to a man. Is, I wish you read the Bible, I wish we prayed, I wish you go to church. I mean, you're just pushing him even farther away, and that's where you have to start trusting God. You start trusting God for whatever needs to happen in your marriage, and hang in there, because it'll change. It really will.
It makes you attractive to your spouse when you're doing the right thing for them. I was being a rat one day, and
one day,
just one day. In 42 years, I had one bad day. But one day I was being a rat, and you came up and you kissed me on the cheek and said something sweet to me and walked away. And I thought, oh, don't do that. Fight me like a man. It just made me feel bad that you were being nice to me when I was being a rat. But it really does. When you fight a spirit, you can only defeat a spirit with the opposite spirit. You can only defeat hate with love. And so whenever you're dealing with a person who's mistreating you, you deal with the opposite spirit, and God honors that and uses it to change their heart. Now, we're going to be right back, so stay tuned.
Going through divorce is a lot to ask of children and often results in years of emotional pain. It's a violent ripping apart of their parents and a sense of abandonment. What sometimes we see as a quick way out can mean complete loss for a child.
You have a 100% chance of success in marriage. You were made for marriage.
Marriage Today exists to protect children from the pain of divorce and to steer couples away from marital failure by telling them the truth. When you stand with Marriage Today, your individual effort multiplies with other like-minded partners, and together we can rebuild a legacy of strong families around the world. Choose your level of partnership today and receive immediate access to the video streaming library. Become a rock-solid partner today.
Well, this program is on, we call it Flying High in Marriage, but Karen, we're talking about, in the teaching I was talking about, autopilot. It's the most dangerous thing that we do in our marriage the day we hit autopilot. And we've been married for a while. Things have been going great, and you're at the altitude that you want. You've been dating and you got married and everything's going great. And then you hit autopilot and you start taking care of kids and you start working and kind of focusing on that. And the next thing you know, you've lost your relationship skills and you're out of fuel and the plane's crashing. And so we experienced that early in our marriage. And it really wasn't because of you. It was because of me. I checked out. I just put the marriage on autopilot. But this is really the most common thing that we see in marriages that are struggling is people are just kind of checked out, and then they wonder why their marriage isn't working.
Well, and I think there's so many things play into the checkout, whether it's, like you're saying, the jobs and just the stress of all that life brings us these days. And then you put on top of that we're, in front of our phones all day long, texting or emailing or Facebooking or on computers. And, by the time you get, face to face with someone, it's like, oh, hello. Yeah. And, you're exhausted. I mean, it's exhausting. And so I think it's so important, to stay engaged with each other and, find new things to do with each other. Maybe you need to find a new hobby so that at least once a week you have something that's outside the box of just the norm that you've been doing for so long.
And every day spending face-to-face time, and I'm not talking about 5 minutes, but I'm saying, when we used to walk we walked every day for an hour and a half, and we talked for 45 minutes, and we prayed for 45 minutes. We did that for over 20 years. That was every day, and that was in the mornings, that we spent an hour and a half talking and praying together every day. So when you get a time that's your time and it's sacred, and your children respect that time, and every day we're relating, every day we're talking and solving problems, the skills of your relationship stay sharp. But somehow we get this notion that just because we're married and sharing the same house or a checkbook or kids, that somehow everything's supposed to work. It doesn't. You have to keep your skills sharp, and you have to stay focused on flying the plane. You have to stay focused on making the relationship work. And so the good news is, marriage works. And the good news is God's a gracious God, and if we've made mistakes, He'll forgive our mistakes. But marriage is one of the most complicated relationships on earth, and that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means you have to pay attention to it. Just like flying an airplane. It's fun, and airplanes are the safest means of travel, but you have to pay attention. It's a skill that you have to keep sharp in. So we hope that this program today has been helpful to you, and get off autopilot. If you've clicked onto autopilot, click off autopilot, start flying the plane again, and you will fall back in love. Your relationship will be passionate the way you desired at the very beginning. We hope that's a blessing to you. And listen, if this program's helped you, and if our ministry blesses you, we hope that you'll stand with us financially. Everything that we do, we're able to do because of our precious partners who stand with us financially and give to the ministry. The information's there on your screen of how you can go on our secure website and give, how you can call us right now, use your bank card to give, and our address is there. You can mail a gift in. We really appreciate you being with us today. God bless you. Goodbye.
Thank you for watching Marriage Today with Jimmy and Karen. Subscribe to Marriage Today's YouTube channel for more marriage-building videos and updates.